Forever isn't a promise. It's a sentence.
Marriage is like blackjack. House always wins, unless you're the dealer. I learned that lesson the hard way on a Tuesday night in Atlantic City, watching my wife Cassie confess her latest fantasy over lukewarm casino coffee. "It's just a dream, Jack," she said, stirring sugar into her cup with the kind of deliberate precision she used when explaining why our credit card bill had mysteriously doubled. "One night, it won't affect us. I'm Jack Russell. Yeah, like the dog, thanks for noticing. 38 years old, ex-military, now working casino security consulting. I've seen every con, every angle, every way people lie to themselves and others. But sitting across from my wife of 12 years, I realized I'd been blind to the biggest scam of all. Let me get this straight," I said, keeping my voice level. "You want to sleep with Tommy Costa, the 25-year-old gym trainer who can't spell commitment, but somehow knows every position in the Kama Sutra." Cassie's perfectly manicured fingers drummed against the table. She'd spent 2 hours getting ready for this conversation, hair blown out, makeup flawless, wearing the black dress I'd bought her for our anniversary, the one she claimed made her feel powerful. "It's not about Tommy specifically," she lied smoothly. "It's about fulfilling a fantasy before I'm too old. You understand fantasies, don't you, Jack?" Oh, I understood fantasies. I understood that my wife had been planning this conversation for weeks, maybe months. I understood that she'd chosen a public place because she knew I wouldn't make a scene. I understood that she'd already made up her mind. And, "If I say no?" I asked. Her smile faltered for just a second. "Then I guess we'll find out how much our marriage really means to you." The casino noise faded into background static. Slot machines chiming, dealers calling cards, the constant hum of air conditioning and broken dreams. I'd spent 3 years working these floors, watching people bet everything on the turn of a card, the roll of dice, the spin of a wheel. Now my wife was asking me to gamble with something that couldn't be replaced. "When?" I asked. "This weekend. The beach house rental I booked. I told you it was for us to reconnect." She reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. "One night, Jack, that's all. Then we can move forward." I pulled my hand away. Move forward to what? To being honest with each other, to not having secrets. The irony was thick enough to choke on. Cassie had been keeping secrets for months. Late nights at the gym, mysterious text messages, new lingerie that never made appearances in our bedroom. She'd been building toward this moment like a prosecutor presenting evidence. And I'd been too stupid or too trusting to see it coming. "I need to think about it," I said. "Of course." She stood up, smoothing her dress. "But Jack, don't take too long. Some opportunities don't wait." I watched her walk away, heels clicking against the casino floor with military precision. 3 men turned to stare as she passed, and she knew it. Cassie had always known the effect she had on people. Real estate had been perfect for her, selling dreams to people who couldn't afford them, making them believe they needed something they'd never wanted until she walked into their lives. My phone buzzed. Text from Joey Marconi, my old army buddy who now ran a private investigation business out of a strip mall office between a nail salon and a Chinese restaurant. "Drinks tonight? Sarah's working late and I'm bored." I typed back, "Rain check. Family stuff." "Everything okay?" I stared at the screen for a long moment, then deleted my response 3 times before settling on, "Define okay." The beach house was 2 hours south of Atlantic City, a weathered gray cottage that Cassie had found on some rental website. Romantic getaway, she'd called it. Just the 2 of us. No distractions. She'd even arranged for her mother to watch Sophie, our 11-year-old daughter who was too smart for her own good and had been asking uncomfortable questions about why Mommy and Daddy seemed angry all the time. I drove home through streets I'd known my entire life, past the high school where Cassie and I had met, past the church where we'd gotten married, past the hospital where Sophie had been born. 17 years of history, and my wife was ready to throw it away for one night with a guy who probably couldn't find Atlantic City on a map without GPS. Our house sat in a development that had been built during the housing boom, when everyone believed property values only went up and mortgages were just numbers on paper. We'd bought it when I got out of the Army, when Cassie was pregnant, and we both believed in forever. Now the neighborhood felt like a museum of abandoned dreams. Half the houses had foreclosure signs, and the rest were occupied by people like us, hanging on by their fingernails and pretending everything was fine. Sophie was in the living room, homework spread across the coffee table, her dark hair falling into her eyes as she concentrated on math problems. She looked up when I walked in, and I saw myself in her expression, cautious, analytical, always calculating the odds. "Mom's upstairs packing," she said. "She seems excited about your trip." "Yeah, she's looking forward to it." Sophie studied my face with the intensity she usually reserved for particularly difficult algebra equations. "Are you looking forward to it?" Kids see everything adults try to hide. It's their superpower, and our curse. "Sure, kiddo. It'll be nice to get away." She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't buying it. Sophie had inherited my BS detector along with my brown eyes and stubborn streak. She'd also inherited Cassie's ability to read people, which made her a dangerous combination of skeptical and intuitive. "Dad?" she said as I headed for the stairs. "Yeah?" "Whatever happens, you know I'm on your team, right?" The words hit me like a punch to the solar plexus. I wanted to tell her that there weren't any teams, that families didn't work that way, that everything was going to be fine. But I'd never lied to Sophie, and I wasn't going to start now. "I know, sweetheart, but let's hope we don't need teams." Upstairs, I found Cassie folding clothes into an overnight bag with the same careful attention she gave everything else. She'd packed the red bikini I'd never seen her wear, along with sundresses that still had tags attached, and enough makeup to stock a department store counter. "I thought you might want to pack," she said, without looking up. "Already did." I gestured toward my duffel bag in the corner, military surplus, functional, containing exactly what I needed and nothing more. She glanced at it and frowned. "You're not bringing anything nice." "Define nice." "Something for dinner. I made reservations at that seafood place on the pier." "The one where Tommy works out on the beach every morning?" Her hands stilled on the silk blouse she was folding. "I wouldn't know his schedule, Jack." Another lie, delivered with the same confidence she used when assuring clients that the house they were buying wasn't in a flood zone. I'd learned to recognize the tell, the way her left eye twitched, almost imperceptibly when she was bending the truth. "Of course not," I said. Silly me. The beach house looked exactly like its online photos, which should have been my first warning. In my experience, things that appear too good to be true usually are. 2 bedrooms, ocean view, deck with hot tub, and enough romantic ambiance to make a greeting card writer weep. Cassie unpacked with the efficiency of someone executing a carefully planned operation. She hung her dresses in the closet, arranged her cosmetics on the bathroom counter, and placed scented candles around the bedroom like she was preparing for a seduction scene in a movie. "This is perfect," she said, standing on the deck as salt air whipped her hair around her face. "Just what we needed." I leaned against the railing, watching surfers catch waves in the distance. "When's your appointment with Destiny?" "What?" "Tommy, when are you meeting him?" She turned to face me, and for a moment her mask slipped. I saw something I'd never seen before. Pity. She felt sorry for me. "Tomorrow night," she said quietly. "After dinner? Here? The Driftwood Motel, room 237. The honesty was almost worse than the lies. She'd moved past caring what I thought, past worrying about my feelings. I was just an obstacle to be managed, a problem to be solved. "I see you've thought this through." "I have." She stepped closer, her hand touching my arm. "Jack, I know this is hard, but sometimes we have to break things before we can fix them. And you think sleeping with a guy young enough to be your kid brother is going to fix us? I think being honest about what we want is going to fix us." I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized I was staring at a stranger. The woman I'd married had been ambitious but not ruthless, confident but not cruel. This version of Cassie was something new, something that had been growing in the shadows of our marriage while I wasn't paying attention. "What if I said I wanted the same thing?" I asked. "What if I told you I had fantasies about other women?" Her grip on my arm tightened. Would it matter?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the ocean. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible over the sound of waves. "This isn't about fairness, Jack. It's about need." That night, we ate dinner at the seafood restaurant like actors playing roles in a play neither of us wanted to be in. Cassie ordered wine and made conversation about the weather, the food, the other couples around us. I nodded and responded at appropriate intervals while mentally cataloging every detail of what might be our last meal together as a married couple. The waiter was young, probably college-aged, with the kind of eager-to-please attitude that reminded me of myself 20 years ago. He flirted mildly with Cassie, nothing inappropriate, just the natural response of a hetero male to an attractive woman who was paying attention to him. "Your wife's very beautiful," he said when Cassie excused herself to the restroom. "Yes, she is. You're a lucky man." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw myself in his earnest expression. Young, optimistic, believing that luck had anything to do with love. "Kid," I said, "let me give you some advice. Luck runs out, always." When Cassie returned, she was glowing with the kind of excitement I hadn't seen since Sophie's first steps. She was anticipating tomorrow night, imagining her fantasy becoming reality. I was anticipating the end of everything I'd thought I wanted. "I have something for you," she said, sliding a small wrapped box across the table. Inside was a watch. Expensive, elegant, engraved with our wedding date and the words, "Forever yours." "I wanted you to have something to remember this weekend," she said. The irony was perfect. A gift to commemorate the night she planned to betray our marriage, engraved with a promise she was about to break. I strapped it onto my wrist and felt the weight of it like a shackle. "Thank you," I said. "I'll treasure it." After dinner, we walked along the beach in silence. Other couples passed us, holding hands, laughing, lost in their own private worlds. I wondered how many of them were happy, how many were just pretending, how many were one conversation away from implosion. "I'm going to bed early," Cassie said when we reached the house. "Tomorrow's going to be a big day." I stayed on the deck, drinking beer and listening to the ocean. At some point, I called Joey. "Jack, it's almost midnight. What's wrong?" "Hypothetically," I said, "if someone you trusted betrayed you, what would you do?" "Hypothetically, I'd make sure they regretted it. And if that someone was your wife?" Joey was quiet for a long moment. "Jesus, Jack, what's going on?" I told him everything. The confession, the plan, the motel room reservation. Joey listened without interrupting, occasionally making sounds that suggested he was taking notes. "You want my professional opinion?" he said when I finished. "Shoot. Document everything, get proof, and whatever you do, don't let her know you're onto her." "I'm not onto her. She told me straight up what she's planning." "That's even better. She's handed you the smoking tool. Now you just have to decide what to do with it." After I hung up, I sat in the darkness thinking about choices and consequences, about the difference between what people say they want and what they actually need. Cassie thought she needed one night of passion with a younger man. What she was about to get was something else entirely. I went inside and found her asleep in our bed, her face peaceful in the moonlight streaming through the windows. She looked younger when she slept, more like the woman I'd fallen in love with. But appearances can be deceiving, and I'd learned not to trust what I saw on the surface. In the morning, she was up early, humming while she made coffee. She'd already showered and dressed in workout clothes that looked like they'd been designed by someone who'd never actually exercised. "I thought I'd go for a run on the beach," she said. "Want to join me?" "I'll pass. Not much of a runner these days." She kissed my cheek, her lips lingering for just a moment. "I'll be back in an hour." I watched from the deck as she jogged toward the section of beach where the local gym crowd gathered for outdoor workouts. Sure enough, Tommy Costa was there, leading a group of tourists through what looked like military-style calisthenics. He was everything I wasn't. Young, muscular, tanned, and completely unaware that he was about to become a pawn in someone else's game. Cassie approached the group casually, as if she just happened to be running by. Tommy noticed her immediately, his attention shifting from his clients to my wife. They talked for a few minutes, and I could see her laughing at something he said, her hand touching his arm in the same way she'd touched mine the night before. I pulled out my phone and started recording. By the time Cassie returned from her run, I had enough video footage to end her real estate career, and probably her relationship with most of our mutual friends. She was glowing with post-exercise endorphins and something else. Anticipation. "Great workout," she said, toweling off on the deck. "I forgot how good it feels to push yourself physically." "I bet you did." She looked at me sharply, but I was staring out at the ocean with the same neutral expression I'd perfected during my army days. Never let them see you sweat, never let them know what you're thinking. "I'm going to shower," she said. "Then maybe we could drive into town, do some shopping." "Sounds perfect." While she was in the bathroom, I uploaded the video files to a secure cloud server and sent copies to Joey with a text message. "Insurance policy. We'll explain later." The town was exactly what you'd expect from a beach community in late summer. Crowded, overpriced, and full of people pretending to have more fun than they actually were. Cassie dragged me through boutiques and art galleries, buying things we didn't need with money we couldn't afford to spend. At a jewelry store, she tried on a necklace that cost more than my monthly salary. "What do you think?" she asked, admiring herself in the mirror. "I think it's expensive. I think I deserve something beautiful." The sales clerk, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a grandmother's smile, looked between us with the expression of someone who'd seen this scene play out countless times. "Special occasion?" she asked. "You could say that," Cassie replied. "I'm celebrating a new chapter in my life." I almost laughed. She was buying jewelry to commemorate her affair, and she wanted me to pay for it. The audacity was impressive in its complete lack of self-awareness. "We'll take it," I said. Cassie's eyes widened. "Really?" "Really. Like you said, you deserve something beautiful." She threw her arms around me, and for a moment I felt like we were a normal couple again. But normal was an illusion, and I'd stopped believing in illusions. That afternoon, while Cassie napped, I walked to the Driftwood Motel. It was exactly the kind of place you'd expect for a clandestine encounter: shabby, anonymous, and probably cleaned with whatever chemicals were cheapest. The desk clerk was reading a paperback novel and didn't look up when I approached. "I'd like to rent a room," I said. "How many nights?" "Just one, tonight." He quoted a price that was probably double what the room was worth, but I paid in cash without arguing. Supply and demand, basic economics. "Room 238, he said, handing me a key. "Right next to 237. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor. I spent an hour setting up surveillance equipment I'd borrowed from my casino security contacts. Nothing illegal, just audio recording devices that would capture whatever happened in the adjacent room. If Cassie wanted to document her new chapter, I was happy to help. Back at the beach house, I found her getting ready for dinner with the kind of meticulous attention usually reserved for job interviews or court appearances. She'd chosen a dress I'd never seen before. Black, form-fitting, expensive. "You look beautiful," I said, and meant it. "Thank you." She turned to face me, and I saw something in her expression that might have been regret. "Jack, I want you to know that whatever happens tonight, it doesn't change how I feel about you." "How do you feel about me?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I love you. I've always loved you. But love isn't always enough." "What is enough?" "I don't know yet. That's what I'm trying to figure out." We had dinner at a different restaurant, an Italian place where the wine was cheap and the portions were large. Cassie ate mechanically, her mind clearly elsewhere. I found myself studying her face, memorizing details I'd taken for granted for 12 years. "Nervous?" I asked. "A little. Second thoughts?" "No." She reached across the table and took my hand. "Jack, I need you to understand something. This isn't about you not being enough. It's about me needing to know if there's something more. And if there isn't, then I'll know. And if there is?" She didn't answer, but she didn't need to. We both knew what would happen if Tommy Costa turned out to be everything she'd imagined. After dinner, we walked back to the beach house in silence. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that would have been romantic under different circumstances. "I should go," Cassie said when we reached the deck. "I know." She kissed me then, long and deep, like she was trying to memorize the taste of my lips. When she pulled away, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know." I watched her drive away, her taillights disappearing into the gathering darkness. Then I got in my car and followed her. The Driftwood Motel parking lot was half full, mostly with cars that had seen better decades. Cassie's BMW looked out of place among the rusted sedans and pickup trucks. She parked near room 237 and sat in her car for several minutes, gathering courage or having second thoughts. From my position in room 238, I had a perfect view through the thin curtains. Tommy arrived 10 minutes later, driving a red sports car that was probably financed at an interest rate that would make a loan shark blush. He knocked on the door of 237, and Cassie let him in. What followed was exactly what you'd expect from two people who'd been building toward this moment for months. Through the thin walls, I could hear everything: the nervous laughter, the awkward small talk, the sounds of clothing being removed and inhibitions being abandoned. I recorded it all. At some point during their encounter, my phone rang. Joey's name appeared on the screen, and I stepped outside to answer. How are you holding up? He asked. I've been better. Where are you? Listening to my marriage end. Jesus, Jack, come home. You don't need to torture yourself. Actually, I think I do. I told him about the recording equipment, about the video from the beach, about the evidence I was gathering. What's your end game here? Joey asked. I'm not sure yet, but when I figure it out, I want to have options. Just remember, revenge is a dish best served cold. Who said anything about revenge? But even as I said it, I could feel something changing inside me. The hurt was still there, the sense of betrayal and loss, but underneath it, something else was growing, something harder and more focused, something dangerous. 2 hours later, Cassie emerged from room 237, looking disheveled and satisfied. Tommy followed her out, and they kissed goodbye like teenagers after prom. She drove away without looking back, and he headed in the opposite direction, probably toward whatever bar or club would stroke his ego for the rest of the night. I packed up my equipment and drove back to the beach house, where I found Cassie in the shower. She was singing, actually singing like she'd just won the lottery. How was your evening? She asked when she came out, wrapped in a towel and glowing with post-coital satisfaction. Quiet. I read a book. I'm glad you found something to occupy your time. She climbed into bed beside me, her skin still warm and smelling like soap and someone else's cologne. She fell asleep within minutes, but I lay awake, staring at the ceiling and planning my next move. The drive home the next morning was surreal. Cassie chattered about the weather, the traffic, her plans for the upcoming week. She seemed lighter somehow, like she'd shed some invisible burden. Meanwhile, I sat behind the wheel with a phone full of evidence and a head full of possibilities. I'm glad we did this, she said, as we pulled into our driveway. Are you? Yes, I feel like we can move forward now. Move forward to what? She looked at me with genuine confusion. To being honest with each other, to not having secrets. I almost laughed. She thought one night of adultery had cleared the air between us, like confessing a sin to a priest. She had no idea that her honesty had just handed me the tools to destroy her. No more secrets, I agreed. Sophie ran out to greet us, full of stories about her weekend with Grandma. She hugged Cassie first, then me, and I could see her studying our faces with that analytical intensity she'd inherited from both of us. How was your trip? She asked. Educational, I said. Cassie shot me a warning look, but Sophie was already moving on to other topics. Kids have short attention spans for adult drama, which is probably a survival mechanism. That night, after Sophie was in bed, Cassie and I sat in our living room like strangers waiting for a bus. She was reading a magazine and I was pretending to watch television, but we were both thinking about what came next. So, she said finally, what now? Now we see what happens. I meant what I said, Jack. About moving forward. I know what you meant. She closed her magazine and looked at me directly. Are you angry? Should I be? I don't know. I hope not. I turned off the television and faced her. Cassie, can I ask you something? Of course. Was it worth it? She was quiet for a long moment, considering the question with the same careful attention she gave everything else. Yes, she said finally. It was. That was the moment I decided to destroy her. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that makes you believe in new beginnings. Cassie left for work humming the same tune she'd been singing in the shower, and Sophie caught the school bus with her usual combination of excitement and dread about whatever social drama awaited her. I called in sick to the casino and spent the morning in my home office, reviewing the evidence I'd collected and planning my next moves. The videos were clear, the audio recordings were damning, and I had enough documentation to end Cassie's career and social life with a few strategic phone calls. But I wanted more than just destruction. I wanted education. Joey arrived at noon with coffee and the kind of grim expression he'd worn during our deployment in Middle East, when the mission briefing included the phrase, high probability of casualties. You look like heck, he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. I feel worse than I look. Show me what you've got. I played the recordings, showed him the videos, walked him through the timeline of Cassie's deception. Joey listened without comment, occasionally taking notes in the small notebook he carried everywhere. This is comprehensive, he said when I finished. Probably enough to get you a favorable divorce settlement. I'm not interested in divorce settlements. What are you interested in? I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. Remember in Middle East when we'd capture enemy intelligence? We didn't just use it once and throw it away. We analyzed it, cross-referenced it, used it to build bigger operations. Jack, your wife isn't the enemy. Isn't she? Joey closed his notebook and looked at me with the kind of concern usually reserved for people standing on ledges. What are you thinking? I'm thinking Cassie isn't the only one who deserves consequences. I've been doing research on Tommy Costa, and what I'd found was illuminating. He wasn't just a gym trainer, he was a professional seducer, a guy who made his living convincing lonely women that they deserved better than whatever they had. Cassie was just his latest mark, and she was too blinded by her own needs to see it. He's got a pattern, I told Joey, spreading printouts across my desk. 3 different women in the past 2 years, all married, all with money. He seduces them, convinces them to leave their husbands, then moves on when the novelty wears off. How do you know all this? I've been making phone calls. Amazing what people will tell you when they think you're a potential client for a private investigator. Joey studied the documents with professional interest. This guy's a predator, and my wife is his current prey. So what's the plan? I pulled out a legal pad covered with notes and diagrams that probably looked like the work of a madman. Phase 1. Isolation. Cassie thinks she's in control of the situation, but she's not. Tommy is. So I'm going to change the dynamic. How? By giving him a better offer. Over the next 3 days, I put my plan into motion. Using a fake name and a prepaid phone, I contacted Tommy and arranged to meet him at a coffee shop in the next town over. I told him I was a wealthy businessman looking for a personal trainer for my wife, someone who could provide specialized services for the right price. Tommy took the bait immediately. He showed up to our meeting wearing a tight t-shirt and the kind of confident smile that probably worked on most women. I was sitting in a corner booth, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap, looking like every middle-aged guy who'd ever had a midlife crisis. "You must be Richard," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "That's right. Thanks for meeting me." "No problem. So tell me about your wife." I pulled out a folder containing photos I'd downloaded from a modeling website, a beautiful blonde in her 30s who looked nothing like Cassie. "Her name's Jennifer. She's been feeling neglected lately, if you know what I mean." Tommy's eyes lit up as he studied the photos. "She's gorgeous. What kind of training is she looking for?" "The kind that builds confidence. The kind that makes her feel desired." "I specialize in that kind of training." "I thought you might. What's your rate for private sessions?" We negotiated a price that was probably more than Tommy made in a month of legitimate personal training. I told him I'd need him to start immediately, that my wife was going through a difficult time and needed attention. "There's just one thing," I said as we shook hands. "Jennifer values discretion. She doesn't want anyone to know about your sessions." "Of course. Client confidentiality is very important to me." "Good, because if word got out about your arrangement, it could be embarrassing for everyone involved." Tommy nodded eagerly, already counting the money he thought he was going to make. He had no idea he'd just agreed to cancel his standing appointment with my wife. That evening, Cassie came home from work with the kind of distracted energy that meant she was planning something. She made dinner mechanically, her mind clearly elsewhere. "I might be working late tomorrow," she said over dessert. "Client meeting?" "Something like that." Sophie looked up from her homework. "Can I stay at Emma's house if you're both going to be late?" "Both?" Cassie asked. "Dad said he might have to work late too." I hadn't said any such thing, but Sophie had inherited her mother's talent for creative truth-telling. She was also smart enough to sense the tension between her parents and manipulate it to her advantage. "That should be fine," I said. "I'll call Emma's mom." After Sophie went to bed, Cassie disappeared into our bedroom to make a phone call. I could hear her voice through the door, but not the words. When she emerged 20 minutes later, she looked confused and slightly frustrated. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Fine. Just some scheduling issues." The next day, Tommy called Cassie to cancel their standing appointment, citing a family emergency. She rescheduled for the following week, but he canceled again and again. By the third cancellation, Cassie was starting to suspect something was wrong. She drove by the gym where Tommy worked, only to find him training other clients with no apparent family crisis in sight. "I think Tommy's avoiding me," she told her friend Mia, during a phone conversation I overheard through the baby monitor we'd never removed from Sophie's room. "Why would he avoid you?" "I don't know. Maybe he's having second thoughts. Or maybe his girlfriend found out." "He doesn't have a girlfriend." "Honey, guys like Tommy always have girlfriends. You were probably just a side piece." The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Mia offering the kind of brutally honest assessment that only best friends can provide. By the end of it, Cassie sounded deflated and confused. That weekend, she suggested another trip to the beach house. "I think we need to reconnect," she said. "Last time was good for us, was it? Don't you think so?" I pretended to consider the question. I suppose it was educational. "Then let's go back, just the two of us." "What about your work schedule? Didn't you have some important meetings coming up?" "I can reschedule." "Are you sure? You seemed pretty committed to those appointments." She looked at me sharply, searching my face for hidden meaning. But I'd perfected my poker face during years of casino work, and she found nothing. "I'm sure," she said finally. We went back to the beach house, but this time the dynamic was different. Cassie was anxious, checking her phone constantly, waiting for messages that never came. She went for her morning run, but Tommy wasn't at his usual spot on the beach. She made excuses to drive into town, hoping to run into him accidentally, but he was nowhere to be found. By Sunday afternoon, she was desperate. "I think I need to extend my gym membership," she announced over lunch. "I thought you were happy with your current routine. I want to try some new things, maybe work with a personal trainer." "That sounds expensive." "It's an investment in my health." "Of course it is." That night, she called Tommy directly. I listened from the next room as she left increasingly frantic voicemails, asking why he was avoiding her calls, demanding to know what she'd done wrong. He never called back. The drive home was quiet. Cassie stared out the passenger window with the expression of someone who just realized they'd been played. She was starting to understand that her fantasy weekend hadn't been the beginning of something new. It had been the end of something she'd never actually had. "Jack," she said as we pulled into our driveway. "Yeah? Do you think people can change?" "I think people reveal who they really are when they think no one's watching." She was quiet for a moment. What if who they really are isn't who they want to be? Then they have a choice to make. And if they make the wrong choice, then they live with the consequences. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Cassie sat at her computer for hours, scrolling through social media, looking for any trace of Tommy Costa. What she found was a series of photos showing him with a young brunette, tagged with locations in Miami. He'd moved on to his next mark, leaving Cassie behind like a discarded lottery ticket. She closed the laptop and looked at me with eyes that were bright with unshed tears. "I think I made a mistake," she said. "What kind of mistake?" "The kind that can't be undone." I nodded sympathetically. "Those are the worst kind. Can you forgive me?" I pretended to consider the question, letting the silence stretch between us like a tightrope. "I don't know yet," I said finally, "but I'm willing to try." She threw her arms around me, sobbing with relief and gratitude. She thought she'd been given a second chance, that her moment of weakness could be forgiven and forgotten. She had no idea that her real punishment was just beginning. 3 weeks after our second beach house trip, Cassie had settled into a routine of aggressive normalcy. She cooked elaborate dinners, planned family activities, and treated me with the kind of attentive devotion usually reserved for recovering invalids. She was trying to earn her way back into my good graces, and I let her believe it was working. Meanwhile, I was conducting a master class in psychological warfare. It started with small things. I'd mention running into people we knew, casual conversations where my name had come up. Nothing specific, just enough to make her wonder what people were saying about us. "I saw Linda Morrison at the grocery store," I'd say over dinner. "She asked how you were doing. Said she'd heard you'd been going through a difficult time." "What did you tell her?" "That you were fine." "Why? Is there something I should have told her?" Cassie would shake her head quickly, but I could see the wheels turning. Who had Linda been talking to? What had they said? The truth was, I hadn't seen Linda Morrison at all, but Cassie's guilty conscience filled in the blanks, creating scenarios that were probably worse than anything I could have invented. I also started making subtle changes to our routine. I'd come home late from work claiming overtime that didn't exist. I'd take phone calls in private, speaking in low tones about nothing important. I'd receive text messages and smile before deleting them without explanation. "Who was that?" Cassie would ask. "Just work stuff." "It must be important if it made you smile." "Not really, just a joke Joey sent me." But I could see her calculating, wondering if I was having my own affair, if I was paying her back in kind. The uncertainty was eating her alive, and I was feeding it one small deception at a time. The real masterstroke came when I started talking about our future. "I've been thinking about making some changes. I announced one evening while we were watching television. What kind of changes? Career changes, life changes. I'm not getting any younger, and I want to make sure I'm living the life I want. What does that mean? It means I'm tired of playing it safe, tired of settling for good enough. I could see the panic in her eyes. She was interpreting my words through the lens of her own guilt, assuming I was talking about our marriage. Jack, if this is about... It's not about anything specific, it's about everything in general. The next day, I had Joey call the house phone while Cassie was home. Is Jack there? He asked when she answered. He's at work. Oh, right, I forgot. Tell him Sarah said thanks for the flowers. They really brightened her day. I hadn't sent Sarah any flowers, but Cassie didn't know that. When I got home, she was waiting with the kind of forced casualness that screamed anxiety. Joey called, she said. Something about flowers for Sarah? Yeah, she's been having a rough time at work. Thought she could use a pick-me-up. That was thoughtful of you. Sarah's a good friend. Good friends deserve thoughtful gestures. The emphasis on good friends wasn't subtle, but it didn't need to be. Cassie was already interpreting everything I said as a potential threat or accusation. 2 days later, I escalated. I came home with a new haircut, new clothes, and a gym membership card that I left conspicuously on the kitchen counter. You look different, Cassie said, studying my appearance with the intensity of a detective examining evidence. I feel different. Good different or bad different? Just different. That weekend, I told her I was going out with Joey for a few drinks. Instead, I drove to a hotel bar across town and sat alone for 3 hours, reading a book and occasionally checking my phone. When I got home, Cassie was waiting up. How was your night? Enlightening. What did you and Joey talk about? Life, choices, consequences. Anything specific? Nothing you need to worry about. But she was worrying. I could see it in the way she watched me, the way she analyzed every word I spoke, every expression that crossed my face. She was looking for signs that I knew about her affair, evidence that I was planning to leave her, confirmation that her moment of selfishness was going to cost her everything she'd taken for granted. The beautiful part was that I didn't have to do anything dramatic. Her own guilt was doing most of the work for me. The final phase began when I started talking about trust. I've been thinking about what makes a marriage work, I said one evening while we were having dinner with Sophie. What conclusion did you reach? Cassie asked carefully. Trust. Everything else is negotiable, but trust is fundamental. I agree. The thing about trust is that it's binary. You either have it or you don't. There's no middle ground. Sophie looked up from her spaghetti. What's binary mean? It means something can only be one of two things, I explained. Like a light switch. It's either on or off. What if the light bulb is broken? She asked. Then you need a new light bulb. Cassie's fork clattered against her plate. I think I'll start the dishes. That night, she tried to initiate love for the first time since our beach house trip. I let her kiss me, let her hands roam over my body, let her believe she was seducing me. Then, just as things were getting serious, I pulled away. I'm sorry, I said. I'm just not feeling it tonight. Is everything okay? Everything's fine. I'm just tired. But I wasn't tired. I was in complete control, and she was finally starting to understand that the balance of power in our relationship had shifted. The next morning, I found her crying in the kitchen. What's wrong? I asked, though I knew exactly what was wrong. I feel like I'm losing you. Why would you feel that way? You're different, distant, like you're somewhere else even when you're here. I poured myself coffee and leaned against the counter, studying her with the same analytical attention she'd once given her real estate clients. Maybe I am somewhere else. Where? Somewhere I can trust what I see. The words hit her like a physical blow. She knew I was talking about her betrayal, but she couldn't confront me directly without admitting what she'd done. She was trapped in a cage of her own making, and I was the one holding the key. Jack, You what? She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again. She wanted to confess, to clear the air, to beg for forgiveness, but she was terrified that confession would lead to consequences she wasn't prepared to face. Nothing, she said finally. I just want things to be okay between us. Things are what they are. That afternoon, while Cassie was at work, I made the phone call I'd been planning for weeks. Mia, it's Jack. I need to talk to you about Cassie. Mia had been Cassie's best friend since college, but she'd also been the one encouraging her to have the affair. She was the kind of person who lived vicariously through other people's drama, and I was about to give her more drama than she could handle. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "That depends on your definition of okay. Can we meet for coffee? There's something you need to know." An hour later, I was sitting across from Mia in a downtown cafe, watching her face change as I played the audio recordings from the Driftwood Motel. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You recorded them?" "I recorded everything." "Jack, this is what, Mia? Shocking? Surprising? Or just embarrassing because you encouraged her to do it?" Her face went pale. "You know about that?" "I know about all of it." "The question is, what are you going to do with this information?" "What do you mean?" I leaned forward, fixing her with the kind of stare I'd perfected during my military days. "I mean, you have a choice. You can keep being Cassie's enabler, or you can help her understand that actions have consequences." "What kind of consequences?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the video I'd recorded on the beach, the footage of Cassie flirting with Tommy Costa while wearing her wedding ring. "The kind that end careers, destroy reputations, and ruin marriages." Mia stared at the screen with the expression of someone watching a car accident in slow motion. "You can't show this to people." "Can I?" "It would destroy her." "She destroyed herself! I'm just documenting the process." I put the phone away and sat back in my chair. "Here's what's going to happen, Mia. You're going to go home and think about what kind of friend you want to be. The kind who helps people make better choices, or the kind who helps them make worse ones. And if I choose wrong, then you'll find out that loyalty is a two-way street, and Cassie hasn't been traveling in your direction." I left her sitting in the cafe, staring into her coffee cup, like it contained the answers to questions she didn't want to ask. That evening, Mia called Cassie. I listened from the next room as my wife's best friend delivered a brutal assessment of her choices and their likely consequences. "You need to tell Jack the truth," Mia said, "before he finds out some other way. He doesn't know anything." "Are you sure about that?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, you're playing with fire and you're going to get burned." After the call ended, Cassie sat in our bedroom for hours, staring at her phone like it was a bomb that might explode at any moment. She was finally starting to understand that her secret wasn't as secret as she'd thought. The next morning, she tried to initiate the conversation I'd been waiting for. "Jack, there's something I need to tell you." "Oh? About the beach house? About what happened there? What about it?" She took a deep breath, gathering courage for a confession that was 3 weeks too late. "I wasn't completely honest with you about my evening activities. Weren't you?" "No, I spent time with someone else." I pretended to consider this revelation with the surprise of someone hearing it for the first time. "Someone else? Tommy, the trainer from the beach?" "I see. I'm sorry, Jack. I know it was wrong, but I thought I needed it. I thought it would help me understand what I wanted." "And what do you want?" "You. I want you. I want our family." I nodded slowly as if processing information that was completely new to me. "Thank you for telling me," I said finally. "That's it? That's all you're going to say? What would you like me to say?" "I don't know. Something, anything." I looked at her with the same neutral expression I'd been wearing for weeks. "Cassie, do you remember what I said about trust being binary?" "Yes. Do you understand what that means for us?" She started crying then, the kind of desperate tears that come when someone finally realizes the magnitude of their mistake. "Please don't leave me," she whispered. "I'm not leaving you." "You're not?" "No, I'm right here. I've been right here the whole time." But she could hear the subtext in my words. I wasn't leaving, but I wasn't staying either. I was existing in the same space, going through the motions, playing the role of a husband without actually being one. That night, she tried to seduce me again. This time I let her. I made love to my wife with the mechanical precision of someone performing a duty rather than expressing passion. When it was over, she lay beside me crying. "It's not the same," she said. "No, it's not. Will it ever be the same again? I don't know. Will it?" She didn't answer because we both knew the truth. Some things, once broken, can't be repaired. They can only be replaced, and replacement requires starting over with someone new. Over the following weeks, I watched Cassie struggle with the reality of what she'd done. She'd gotten her fantasy, but the cost had been higher than she'd anticipated. She'd traded the security of a loving marriage for one night of passion with a man who discarded her like a used tissue. The final revelation came when Tommy Costa returned to town 6 weeks later. I saw him first, working out on the beach with a new group of tourists. I mentioned it casually to Cassie over dinner. Saw your friend Tommy today. Her head snapped up. Where? The beach. Looks like he's back in business. That weekend, she drove to the beach alone. I followed at a distance, watching as she approached Tommy during his morning workout session. The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. I could see her gesturing animatedly while he looked around uncomfortably, clearly wanting to escape. When she walked back to her car, her shoulders were shaking with suppressed sobs. That night, she told me what had happened. He acted like he didn't know me, she said. Like I was just some crazy woman bothering him. Maybe that's how he sees you. How can you say that? Because it's probably true. You were a conquest, Cassie. A married woman who was willing to risk everything for one night with a younger man. That's not romance. That's desperation. The words were cruel, but they were also accurate. Cassie had been so focused on her own needs that she'd failed to see the bigger picture. I thought he cared about me. Did you care about me when you were with him? She didn't answer, but she didn't need to. We both knew that her moment of selfishness had cost her everything she'd claimed to value. 6 months later, we were living like polite strangers. We shared a house, co-parented our daughter, and maintained the appearance of a marriage. But the substance was gone, replaced by a hollow routine that satisfied neither of us. Cassie aged visibly during those months. The stress of living with the consequences of her choices carved lines around her eyes and mouth. She'd gotten what she'd asked for, honesty between us, no more secrets. But honesty without trust is just organized cruelty. Sophie, now 12 and even more perceptive than before, asked me one evening if her parents were going to get divorced. What makes you think that? I asked. You and Mom don't talk to each other anymore, not really. We talk. You exchange information. That's not the same thing. She was right, of course. Cassie and I had become business partners in the enterprise of raising our daughter, nothing more. Are you worried about divorce? I asked. Sophie considered the question with the seriousness she applied to everything important. I'm worried about you being unhappy, she said finally. What makes you think I'm unhappy? You smile, but your eyes don't. Kids see everything. That night, I made a decision. I called Joey and asked him to meet me for drinks. You look like heck, he said when he saw me. I feel worse than I look. Mission accomplished? Mission accomplished. So, why aren't you celebrating? I stared into my beer, trying to find words for feelings I hadn't expected. Revenge is supposed to feel better than this. Is it? Isn't it? Joey was quiet for a moment, studying my face with the expression of someone trying to solve a complex equation. Jack, can I ask you something? Shoot. What did you actually win? The question hit me like a punch to the solar plexus. I'd spent months destroying my wife's peace of mind, systematically dismantling her sense of security, proving that I was smarter and more ruthless than she'd imagined. But what had I actually won? I'd won the right to live with a woman who was terrified of me. I'd won the privilege of watching my daughter navigate the emotional minefield of her parents' failed marriage. I'd won the satisfaction of knowing that Cassie would never again take me for granted. But I'd lost the woman I'd married, the partnership we'd built, the possibility of forgiveness and renewal. I won, I said finally, but I'm not sure what the prize was. Maybe it's time to figure that out. The next morning, I found Cassie in the kitchen, making coffee with the mechanical precision of someone going through the motions of normal life. She looked up when I entered, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen in months. Hope. Good morning, she said carefully. Good morning. We stood there for a moment, two people who'd once loved each other enough to build a life together, now strangers sharing the same space. Cassie, I said finally. Yes? We need to talk. Her face went pale. About what? About what comes next. She poured coffee into 2 mugs and handed me one, her fingers trembling slightly. What do you think comes next? She asked. I really looked at her, and saw not the woman who'd betrayed me, but the mother of my child, the person I'd shared 17 years of my life with, the human being I'd systematically tormented for 6 months. I think, I said slowly, that we both got what we deserved. Which is the chance to find out who we really are when everything else is stripped away. She was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications of my words. And who are we? I don't know yet, but I think it's time we found out. That afternoon, while Sophie was at school, Cassie and I had the conversation we should have had months earlier. We talked about trust and forgiveness, about consequences and second chances, about the difference between punishment and justice. "I know you'll probably never forgive me," she said. "Probably not. And I know things will never be the same between us." "No, they won't." "So what do we do now?" I looked out the window at our neighborhood, at the houses full of people trying to figure out how to live with the choices they'd made. Now we decide whether we want to build something new or keep living in the ruins of something old. What do you want to build? I don't know yet, but I know I'm tired of being angry. Are you? Tired of being angry? I considered the question honestly. For months, anger had been my fuel, my motivation, my reason for getting up in the morning. But anger is a finite resource, and I'd finally exhausted mine. "Yeah," I said. "I am." "So what happens now?" Now we see if two people who've hurt each other as badly as we have can figure out how to stop. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It wasn't a happy ending. But it was a beginning. And sometimes, that's enough.